we're going to get the meeting going, and we are honored to have some distinguished friends and neighbors. They're going to start this off, Mr. Manager.
All right, well, Mayor, members of council, I'd like to introduce Captain Chad Vincelet, the current commanding officer of Navy Oceana, and Captain John Hewitt, the executive officer of NAS Oceana. They're going to give us a presentation today, a little bit on the update of Oceana, and then also a presentation on what we call P4, which is a new base design initiative going forward for the Navy.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys for having me out today. I appreciate you getting us on the agenda. Thank you, Tom, for doing that. So a couple of things. I'm a short timer here, so I'll talk a little bit about that. But I really wanted to thank you guys, the city council, and then the city offices in general, just for the fantastic relationship during at least my tenure, and I know all my predecessors would say the same thing that you've had with Oceana, and how we've worked together and coordinated things. And the brief we have for you today, I think, is just going to take that relationship to a whole new level. Just been fantastic. The other piece is, as I said, I'm a short timer, so our change of command is on Saturday at the air show, and then I'm planning to retire from the Navy after that. But I'm going to stay local. We're staying in the local area, so I once told my mom I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I grow up, and she said, well, honey, you can't do both. So now I guess I have to grow up. So at some point, I got to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. But on that note, I want to introduce John Hewitt, who is the current XO. He's going to be taking over on Saturday. And then right next to him is Bob Holmes, who's the prospective executive officer. He's coming in, so he'll be the XO, and then the commanding officer after John. So really fantastic lineage. And kind of consistent leadership here is going to be really good, and I can foresee the relationship with the city of Virginia Beach continuing to grow. So the presentation we have for you today, I know there's a lot of new city council members. Some of you have come out to Oceana, and we've kind of talked to you about this. Some of you have been on council for quite a few years, and maybe it's been a while since you've kind of heard the basics. So the way we're going to divide the brief today is I'm going to kind of give you a 101 on Oceana, about 15 minutes, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me and ask about it. And then we're going to go into what we call Oceana future base design, and where do we see Oceana going in the future and how we're changing it. It's a pretty innovative concept that we kind of developed during my tenure. John has been very integral in that whole thing, fully on board. I'm letting him run with it, and obviously I knew he was going to be my successor, so it made sense for us to build this together. And he's kind of brief you on what we see as next, and a lot of it has to deal with partnerships with the city of Virginia Beach. So if you have any questions on anything, just ask me. Feel free to stop, and I'd like this to kind of be a conversation. So you guys know what we do at Oceana. Our job is to prepare and train the forces to go out and deploy around the world. And really, my job as the base commander is customer service. I have to provide all the customer service things for those folks so that I can enable the operators to go out and do the job that they do. And we'll talk specifics about, different numbers of aircraft and that kind of stuff that are out there. As the CEO of Oceana, we own 3 installations. I kind of call it a tale of 2 cities. So we have a very good relationship with the city of Chesapeake as well. So obviously in Virginia Beach, we have Oceana and Dam Neck, and I'll talk about those. And then I've got Fentress that's down to the south. And really what we use Fentress for is a strategic asset that we practice our carrier landings down there. And the reason it's down there is just as you'll see in some of the pictures, some of the development that's happened around Oceana, and the proximity of neighborhoods and everything else. We try and keep the noise to a decent level and try and be good neighbors. And so we do most of our carrier landing practices down at Fentress Airfield. So just kind of brief history. Oceana, we celebrated our 75th anniversary last year, so we became a Naval Auxiliary Landing Field in 1943. You can see in the 60s when we transitioned to jets, that's when we put those big runways in, and then in the circle area is kind of where the old airfield used to be. Right now, if you're familiar, that's where our skeet range is, RV park, and all that kind of stuff. And then the base is really down to the south side now. Then here's kind of the picture I talk about. And we'll talk about just the fantastic relationship that Oceana has had with the state and with the city on helping kind of zone some of that area around, whether it's in our noise areas and those kind of things. There's some big numbers on there. I won't go into all of that. You'll notice the tower operations, about 55,000. That's takeoffs and landings combined. And then the bottom one, FCLP, that's field carrier landing practice. You can see there's very few there. we don't practice landings at Oceana. We generally go down to Fentress. Those 84 from 2018 happened after the snowstorm. I didn't have snow removal down at Fentress, and we had an operational requirement for guys to practice landings. So we did it right there at Oceana. But when we do that, we usually put it out on our information line. We reach out to public affairs, we reach out to television stations and let them know we're going to do it just in case there's something different. So in effect, we're basically a small city almost within Virginia Beach there. So we have fire, emergency services, emergency operations center, public works, and all those things. And the great thing is we have a fantastic relationship with the city of Virginia Beach. All of those things, whether it was Hurricane Dorian coordinating with the city staff on, hey, they're going to evacuate Sandbridge, so we're going to evacuate Dam Neck. We're going to work together. We're going to open up Dam Neck to help with evacuation. Those are all the kind of partnerships that I'm talking about that we have with the city, and it's been really fantastic. Some basic numbers on Oceana. We're all F-18 Super Hornets now, so for the longest time, most people wouldn't know the difference between, we call a Legacy Hornet, the Charlie, and the Super Hornet, but we're all Super Hornets now. Bottom line is we have about 330 aircraft that are there. You'll never see all 330 there at one time. Generally, there's a carrier deployed, one that's training, and then another air wing doing training. So anywhere from a quarter to a half of that is generally kind of what you see around the base. Just for reference, Langley Air Force Base up on the peninsula has less than 100 aircraft there. So we're almost 3 times the size, maybe even a little bit more than what we've got there. And just as an example of, what you see is that the aircraft and aircrew that fly out of Oceana, when you see Navy aircraft on the news flying combat missions in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, they're flying, a lot of them either out of the West Coast base in Lemoore or they're flying here out of Oceana. So those crews are your neighbors, that are working on those jets and flying out of here, and they're the ones performing those combat missions. So a lot of the stuff that happened in Syria back in 2014 when all that went on was Carrier Wing 8 right here out of Oceana. Fentress down in Chesapeake, you can see quite a bit of farmland around there, and that's why we use it as our outlying field. You will see we did a lot. We had 84 FCLP operations at Oceana in 2018. We had almost 58,000 down at Fentress, so quite a bit of difference there. And then we also use Fentress kind of as a joint training facility, so there's a lot of state agencies that come down there and a lot of other military agencies that come down just because of the size we have. They do paradrops down there. They do helicopter practice landings and all kinds of things down at Fentress. And we're working with the city of Chesapeake on some potential police and fire training down there as well. Dam Neck is the kind of the quiet one around. Most people don't even think about Dam Neck, but it's really about 3.5 miles of beach that's down there. And I will tell you, on Dam Neck, there's some strategic stuff that's located there, a lot of schools. We basically have a college campuses down there. We put about 20,000 students, believe it or not, through Dam Neck. So we have a galley down there, which is like a dining hall from college. We have what we call barracks, but it's basically a dormitory. We put about 20,000 students a year through there. And then obviously some other advanced warfare capability that's also located at Dam Neck Annex. Here's the big one City Council probably cares about is what's the economic impact of Oceana. So we put about $1.4 billion into the local economy here. Not only just the money, but we're the folks that are out, eating at restaurants, doing those things, living in the neighborhoods. You go to church, a lot of your church leaders I know, and the Pee Wee League coaches and all that kind of folks are a lot of Navy folks. So we're an integral part of the community here. I have about 1,000 base housing units. Most of them are out, not on the base. And so you can see with 18,000 personnel with 1,000 units, the vast majority of people that work at Oceana live in your neighborhoods, and they're just part of the fabric of this of the city. This is a big one we've partnered on, and Johnny Lauterbach, our community planning liaison officer, was a big part of this. So we don't like to say the BRAC word, but back in 2005 when BRAC came through, we started looking at what's the encroachment around Oceana and how do we mitigate that. And that's just been a shining example through the Oceana Land Use Conformity Committee between the city and the state and the Navy, buying up different properties, zoning it, and making it compatible use around Oceana. And it's really become the model in the nation for everybody else that's got an airfield. They come to us and ask us, how do you do it? How do you build that relationship with the city and the state? And how do you do those things and help to maintain the viability of your airfield that's here? And the last one that I'll talk about, I think all of you should have gotten invitations to the air show. We hope to see you guys out there on Saturday or Sunday. XO and I are going to do our change of command at the air show on Saturday, which will be fantastic. But I will tell you, my favorite day of the air show is on Friday. So Friday traditionally was the practice air show, and it was usually we started doing a Wounded Warriors, and we partner with the Noblemen, and we have a special needs tent. We have lots of special needs kids that come out there, and it's just a fantastic thing. 4 years ago, when I was the prospective executive officer like Bob coming in, the commanding officer had talked to Dr. Spence about building a STEM laboratory at the air show to get the kids excited about STEM, and he said, hey, we'd like to bring some 5th graders out. And Aaron said, I'm all in. And he said, what do you mean we're all in? He said, all of them. So this will be the 4th year in a row that every 5th grader in Virginia Beach, over 5,500 students, come out and they get to spend about 4 hours at the air show. We have over 100 to 150 basically points of contact, whether it's NASA's a big presence this year, some military things, and then a lot of the science academies and all those departments at the different high schools within Virginia Beach bring out displays too, and the kids get kind of hands-on experience, and they get really excited about it. And it's just a fantastic event. I mean, it just makes my day when you see those kids out there smiling and having a good time. It's a lot of fun. And as a side note, the Guinness Book of World Records is going to be there this year, and we're going for the biggest field trip in the world. Current record is 1,800 students, so we should smoke it with 5,500. So Virginia Beach City Schools should be in the Guinness Book of World Records, the next version that comes out. So pretty fantastic event, and it's a lot of fun. And that's my favorite day at the air show. So any questions?
Any questions?
On the air show or any of that? All right. Future-based design. So I'm going to have John come up and talk about that and kind of what we're doing and kind of give you. So we had an opportunity to talk to the Hampton Roads Chamber and then the Virginia Beach Chamber last week. We briefed them on this. So the business community is fully aware of what's going on, and I'll bring up John.
Captain Vincent, before you start, I just want to give our heart, and I really think I speak on behalf of council and everybody in the city of Virginia Beach, our heartfelt thanks to you personally, for the time and effort and the bridges that you have built. Since we went through the BRAC in 2005 together, we have had a tremendous relationship, with Oceana that has built with a legacy of commanding officers. But I especially want to commend you for your efforts in just really help fostering the positivity between the Navy and Oceana and us, and the fact that you have decided to make Virginia Beach your home. And just want to thank you and acknowledge you, and really appreciate your effort.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
And we'll see you around.
All right, you will.
That happens a lot.
All right.
They come here and they stay.
That's what we like. Thank you.
Mayor, City Council, thanks again for having us today. I'm John Hewitt, and it was so great to serve under Chad and kind of serve as in an apprentice role. He really showed me the ropes, and then him being a native of Virginia Beach and really knowing the relationship with the city has set the installation, not just me, but really Oceana up for success, and we hope to continue that with myself and then Bob behind me. So Oceana just celebrated 75 years. We're in our 76th year, and it's an awesome installation. It's not going anywhere. There's no consideration of moving any capacity out of Oceana. I think we're going to be there for the next 75 years, but we're starting to show our age. We really are. It's old. Some of the facilities are deteriorating, they're crumbling, and some of the critical facilities like the hangars and the barracks, the galley, and other areas. And there's not enough money right now in the Navy to go around. But we're at a unique intersection of opportunity, reality on the installation, the type of leadership and the type of fiscal environment that has created something called future-based design. And so we've been given a lot of leeway by very senior Navy leadership to be very agile, to really think outside of the box and challenge the way that we do business. And you're looking at the NAS Oceana Planning Committee. It's really myself, the CEO, and Johnny Lauterbach that have come up with this plan. And it's still kind of in the planning phase, and we're about to move out, and I can talk more about that. We have facilities that are going on 60 years, and the funding that we get on an annual basis, I could argue it's at around 5% of the requirement. Okay, so could you imagine running any facility within the city of Virginia Beach at 5% of its requirement? That's where we are presently. And we are really at a crossroads. And we've raised this issue up with leadership, and they've said, keep doing what you do and keep planning. And let me move on here. I know it said 67% there. It depends on the age of the installation. It's really a much lower than that. But we are the East Coast Master Jet Base, and there is an increasing conflict between our mission, our sailor quality of life, and how we deliver those services. So future-based design. We were literally looking at an overlay of Oceana, the map, and said, where can we find efficiencies? Where can we find opportunities? We've heard the comment that Oceana is, something for the residents of Virginia Beach, you have to drive around. It's kind of a black hole. Well, maybe with future-based design, we can remove that moniker. We can remove that notion. So what we want to do is reduce our total ownership costs and our footprint of Oceana infrastructure. And I really want to get to the map where the heart of the conversation is, but we want to use various mechanisms, some P4 opportunities, some out-lease agreements, and some other arrangements to look at maybe delivering services that aren't necessarily delivered by the Navy. If we could partner with the city of Virginia Beach or a private developer to say, run a golf course or to run a barracks, we're open for talks, we're open for negotiation. Maybe we could focus on our core mission, which is really on the flight line, and partner with a willing partner to provide those kind of softer services. Equally important, but we're just not doing them. Okay. So, as depicted here on the white line, that is the current fence line, property line for NAS Oceana. You'll see this yellow line, I'll talk about that in a minute. Comes in front of the horse stables, down Harper's Road, along the golf course, and then back out to Dam Neck Road. That is our current fence line. What we want to do right now is perhaps move our fence line as depicted in the yellow line and open up that portion of the base for potential partnership opportunities. It would still remain as federal property administered by the Department of the Navy and Oceana, but perhaps we could go into a partnership with somebody that wanted to run a barracks, wanted to run a gym, wanted to run a golf course, and really open this up to anybody that wanted to get onto the installation. I'll call out the golf course, and this is unique within the city of Virginia Beach. We have 36 holes. It's a unique capability. We could envision a day where if there's a convention that's happening at the convention center or at the ocean front, and they want to put 300 golfers on a golf course at the same time, they could potentially come to Oceana. They don't need a D-bids cards. They don't need to be vetted. They would just show up. We would hand them their clubs and their golf carts, have a shotgun start, and they'd be golfing at Oceana. That's what we envision. You also see some other stars, some locations that are both within our fence line and outside of our fence line. Those are federal properties that Oceana administers. They belong to us, and they're largely encumbered by, they're basically forested. We would like to open that up for some out-lease agreements, some out-lease arrangements with potential developers. We're working with your economic development, Taylor Adams and his team. They have identified this parcel down here as some of the highest industrial potential. Is that right, Johnny? Is that what he said within the city of Virginia Beach? Maybe we could turn these parcels into something that's economically viable, creates a new job base, a new tax base for the city. And then other opportunities up along the west side, excuse me, the east side of the base. This parcel right here along London Bridge Road, which has access to 264 and the flight line, this is unique. We want to reserve this plot of land for an industry that's supporting the Navy's Hornet readiness. So a Boeing, a Lockheed Martin, a Raytheon, somebody that could develop perhaps a facility that had access to London Bridge Road, to 264, and more importantly, the flight line. And we're in conversation with economic development about that. We've gone into an unofficial agreement with economic development for that organization to advertise some of our future-based design initiatives and where we want to take the base. And Taylor's been a great partner thus far, and we look forward to working with him and his staff in the future. That's really the overview of future-based design. I wanted to open up to any questions or comments, or to Oceana if anything I missed.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, Guy?
I want to thank you for the, Councilman Rouse and I were able to visit with Congresswoman Luria, and we certainly enjoyed our visit. Could you explain just briefly the legal situation of when you say a lease out, or what you contemplate? What is Taylor advertising in terms of the conditions of use from
So
outside? First as to the Boeings and the Raytheons, and then maybe to the non-cleared industries.
We think that an out-lease arrangement, and just to give you some time frame, probably on a 5-year basis, would be written between NAS Oceana, representing the Department of the Navy, and a potential partner. And the terms of that lease would be whatever the monetary value is for that piece of property would come directly to NAS Oceana. It would not go back to the Department of the Navy. It would not go to the Treasury. And the reason we're doing this is, and again, I go back to that small amount of sustainment control I get per year. I would want to augment that control with a lease arrangement. There are some legal hurdles that we have to get through. We are the federal government. We're lethargic. We're slow. There are certain processes that we have to follow, certainly some environmental considerations that we have to get over. Johnny and our public works staff, as well as NAFAC Mid-Atlantic that works in Norfolk, they have planning experts, environmental experts, real estate experts that are holding our hand through this process. As far as the maturity of the western side off of London Bridge, I'd have to defer to Taylor on that. He's been talking directly with potential partners, and that's really the lash up that we were hoping for, that he would be the conduit between Oceana, the Navy, and some potential developers. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Jim?
If I could follow up on that, Captain, because this is, I guess, about the 4th time I've seen you do
Yeah.
this presentation, and it seems to me that the last couple of times you talked about the fact that you actually couldn't accept revenue directly, but you could do in-kind services from the individuals that you leased to.
That is another way that we could affect an outlease, is that instead of receiving an in-kind cash payment, we could say, okay, for developer X, if you run a widget company, instead of giving us a cash payment, you're going to provide us with X amount in roof services or building maintenance fees. Just another way to get at the same problem. How can I help my own infrastructure?
But when you mention it, so is there a little bit of movement in the lethargic organization you talk about to allow y'all to actually accept funding directly, or is this?
I'm going to look at Johnny right now and.
Yeah, the way we would receive the value would, right now, under current authority, need to be in-kind services.
Okay.
So we can't receive cash directly, but we do have the authority to enter into a lease agreement for services of the equivalent value.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? John?
Good example, if you go down to the Air Force Base where NASA is a tenant, 2/3 of that property, the Navy is a tenant, but in the middle, all the SpaceX companies have office buildings. And the government gets services in kind, but we have leased those buildings to the people doing, like, all those little entrepreneurs trying to launch stuff into space, but that's a good example of what they do there. I think you're looking at something similar.
We are.
Okay, anybody else?
Okay, yeah, Sabrina.
I just wanted to say, and the mayor already expressed our appreciation to the commander and all that you have done. But I remember when I came down and I visited the base and sat down and talked with you, one of the takeaways that I took from the conversation was the interdependent relationship that we have on one another as a city and with the base. And I just want to make sure that we continue, because our success is your success and your success is our success. And so I just want to make sure we continue with our interim leadership, and when we do hire a new city manager, that we really focus on preserving that relationship and building on it, because that's going to be a key to the success of
Yep.
our city and our base.
Baked into this plan literally from day one is how can we make ourselves more resilient with the city of Virginia Beach? Literally, that was the conversation from the inception of this plan. And we fully understand where we are and the special place that we have with the city.
Good.
And it does not go unnoticed, we certainly appreciate it.
And I do as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
And Captain Hewitt, we certainly welcome you in your new role, and we continue to embrace the Navy. And, this is just a plethora of opportunity to even
It is.
build, better bridges when you think about it. And once again, we look forward to the continuing relationship with you at the helm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Leahy.
You can stay if you like, but
All right, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Tom.
see you on Saturday.
Hopefully we'll see you at the show.
Thanks, Aaron.
See you on
Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor and members of council, I'd now like to bring in Public Works and the Stormwater staff, and Tony Alger, the head of our Stormwater Engineering Center, is going to give you an update on where we are with the Stormwater CIP projects.
Do I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
On you.
Okay, I didn't see. All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Today I'm going to give you a brief quarterly update. I'm going to just hit the highlights of each one of these projects. So these are the 15 projects that I'm going to go over with you today. I wanted to point out that of these 15, we have added 7 to the CIP, and I actually presented this to you in June. And of the 15, we do have some delays to report this time. There are 5 projects that I'm going to be reporting delays on. So you've seen this slide before. This is where these 15 projects are located within the city. I did want to point out that we actually have more projects in the CIP, a total of 34 projects in the CIP, and they are located in these areas in the city of Virginia Beach. These are projects that just don't have year one funding, but they are included in the adopted CIP. And I also want to point out that that doesn't include operations and maintenance projects as well as water quality projects. All right, jumping right in, Aragona drainage improvements. This project does have a delay this time. We were hoping to go to construction or advertise for construction in July of this year. Our real estate department is working with the property owner. We need a permanent drainage easement at the outfall of this project. We have been unsuccessful in reaching agreement. We continue to negotiate with this property owner, but I am extending the advertisement for construction out to July of 20. Hopefully, we'll be able to reach an agreement, and if not, we may need to come back for a condemnation ordinance.
Do you have a red line date as to when you're no longer going to negotiate and actually,
I do not.
I think we should consider that at some point, know where negotiations stop and we get on with the public improvement.
Okay. Asheville Park drainage improvements. This project also is showing a delay this time. As I'm sure you're aware, the developer's portion of the project, which does include the construction of the stormwater ponds and the ponds expansion and the channels connecting those ponds, has been delayed. And this is due to the lawsuit that was filed by the Back Bay Restoration Foundation. Now, these improvements are needed for us to mitigate the flooding in the two villages, so I did want to point that out. I don't have a lot of information on the lawsuit. I only know that the Army Corps of Engineers has asked the developer to delay the project until December of this year. Our projects related to Asheville Park, we are continuing to work on those. The pump station is 100% complete in the design. We are hoping to advertise that one for construction in January. And the drainage and roadway improvements, which includes the improvements at the intersection of Sandbridge and Newbridge, and it also includes the clearing and dredging of the ditch between Flanagan's and Newbridge. That design is also complete and expected to advertise for construction in January. And the farm ditch, the design is complete. The Public Works Operations Group hopes to start construction on that project by the end of the year. The Central Resort District, this is the 24th Street Culvert project, which we pulled out of the parent project. It is under design and approximately 30% complete. We are hoping to advertise this one in the summer of '21, but we are expecting possible delays with acquisition. Chubb Lake and Lake Bradford. This fall in November, we're going to have a public meeting that with the neighborhoods of Pleasure that surround Pleasure House Road, Hollis Road, and the neighborhoods of Church Point, and we're going to discuss some of the preliminary findings from the modeling that has been done for this area. We also would like to get their feedback on some areas that they see flooding currently. The preliminary engineering report is underway and should be complete next summer. And design continues on the interim projects. And we hope to advertise the Pleasure House Lake Outfall project early next year. And the ditch dredging project at Lake Bradford requires easements, and we're going to advertise that one in the summer of '21. Eastern Shore Drive Drainage Phase 1. Now, if you recall, I did split projects out of this, so this is considered the parent project. However, we do still have an active project on the CIP. That's the Cape Henry Canal Drainage Improvements Project. We had our bid opening July 23rd. We are expected to start construction in December of this year. And this project is expected to be complete in October of '21. Now, there was a mistake in your Friday package. It said 2020. It will be October 2021. So the next three projects are projects that were split out of the parent. I did introduce these to you back in June. We are under design for the Cape Henry Canal Phase 2 portion of the project. It is approximately 65%, and we are planning to advertise for construction in July of '21. The Lynn Haven Colony Park Pump Station project. We're in the early stages of design for this project. It's only approximately 15% complete. And the other pump station in the CIP is the Lynn Haven Drive Pump Station, also in the early stages and approximately 15% complete. Sherwood Lakes, we are showing a delay on this project. The interconnect pipe project is substantially complete. The pump station project was expected to be complete this month, and the contractor is reporting a delay, and we hope that they are finished by the end of October. The Southern Canal Lead Ditch and Culvert Improvement Project. This project receives $2.4 million a year now, and with the additional funding, we have added 3 new sites. The first one, and they're shown in red on the slide. The first one we're calling site number 10. It is the intersection of Charity Neck Road and Gumbridge Road. We're actually looking at this site based on some reports we received from the public in our last public meeting. Site 11, Beggars Bridge Creek from Charity Neck Road Bridge east to Muddy Creek Road. That work is going to include some channel clearing in Beggars Bridge Creek. And we're going to continue in Beggars Bridge Creek with the site we're calling 18. And that one goes from Charity Neck Road south. And that work's going to include channel clearing and slip lining the pipe that goes under Pleasant Ridge. All 3 of these sites should begin the survey by the end of the year. And moving on to the projects that are active under this program, site number 5, Public Works Operations finished the ditch work along Dolly Road. We had some additional survey done to replace 3 driveway culverts because they were installed at reverse grade, so those are going to be regraded, and that work should begin in December of this year. The work along Beggar's Bridge Creek will begin early next year and should be complete by the end of 2020. And this was another typo in the Friday package. We had reported that it would be complete February 2020 when it's actually going to begin in February. Site number 6, we did go out and get some more survey to include some additional area where residents were complaining of flooding. We wanted to pick up, there's a 15-inch pipe in this area that we wanted to pick up in the survey. The ditch clearing along Pleasant Ridge Road is scheduled to start again in January of next year. And the design for the rest of the improvements is approximately 30% complete, and we hope to go to construction in January of '21 if we can obtain the necessary easements. Site number 7, this is the intersection of Pleasant Ridge Road and Charity Neck Road. We extended the limits on this project as well to evaluate drainage concerns. We heard from the public. They asked us to extend the limits along Charity Neck and on Pleasant Ridge Road. The design is approximately 90% complete, and we expect to go to construction early 2021, again, pending acquisition of easements.
Barbara?
Oh, go ahead and finish that one.
Oh,
You're still
last one. Site number 9. This project was delayed a little bit. The Public Works Operations had hoped to start cleaning the existing culverts under Gumbridge Road beginning in October. However, they've told us we need to evaluate whether traffic needs to be detoured in order to do this work. So we're expecting the project not to start until January of '20. The design for the rest of the work is underway and approximately 90% complete, and we hope to go to construction next year.
Just as a comment, I really appreciate that community meeting you all had, because I think you all did learn a lot, and you've added quite a lot to all of this. And I kind of suspect as you go along, you might pick up a few other things. But I think that really was such a help in identifying these other areas that the folks knew about.
Agree.
And anytime y'all want to go back out to the community with anything, it's easy to set up. But I really think that was a very valuable time, and I really appreciate all of these additions.
Good.
I know it will cause everything to take a little longer to get done, but it looks to me like you've done a really good job, and I think all of this over in Gumbridge is, most of that is an addition, and I really appreciate that, so.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the Stormwater Master Planning Analysis and Modeling Project. This project has a slight delay to it, about a month. We had reported that the Elizabeth River watershed and the Southern Rivers watershed would be complete by the end of this month. However, it looks like it could be the end of the year before we're complete. The rest of the stormwater models are complete. The one exception, Drainage Basin 2, we are still waiting validation locations for that area, and that's the area that includes kind of the Burton Station Road area, Virginia Wesleyan College area, and Lake Edward. We were hoping to get some more photos from the last storm. We did not, so we are continuing to look for ways to validate and calibrate that model.
Yes?
Is it most of on the Elizabeth River, that area, is it mostly because we just don't have?
We don't have much flooding there, so we can't validate it to a known storm. It's actually a pretty high area in the city, so we will use other methods if we can't actually validate it to a storm.
I've had several people reach out during, Dorian, of course, not a lot, but I did have a lot of people reaching out to me in that area that had a lot of street flooding.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Did they have any pictures?
well, they did, and they said that they sent them to the website.
Okay.
Or that email address.
Okay.
But I have copies of them too, so I'll just forward them.
Okay.
Maybe they just didn't make it, but I know that that's not like the number one concern we have. But I every time we have any significant rain, I get people calling me about it. So.
Yeah, and I mean, and two is actually, you can see where it's located up there at the top. So it's,
It's actually mostly people probably closer to like 2021.
yes, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue, is that specific drainage area, we're having a hard time finding photos.
Okay, so, all right, got it. Thank you.
Windsor Woods, Princess Anne Plaza, and the lakes. This is the overall preliminary concept plan that you are very familiar with. It's the recommended solution set for these three neighborhoods. Just to kind of give you an idea of the total area, it is 2,500 acres. The three neighborhoods that are within the project limits contain approximately 77 miles of roadway. And this preliminary concept plan, as I mentioned, has been presented several times. So the main features of it include the major tide gates at 3 locations and barriers, the 2 large pump stations at Lake Windsor and North London Bridge Creek, and additional stormwater storage at Bow Creek Golf Course and possibly North Gate Plaza Park. It also includes over 55,000 feet of new stormwater drains. Now, back in May and again in June, we presented a Phase 1 concept where we actually pulled the stormwater drain work out into a second phase of the project to make the costs a little bit more manageable. It's still over $225 million. This phase does include everything from the Phase 1, with the exception, I said, of the storm drains. It does still include the pipe projects that we've presented on that were called the FEMA reimbursement projects. But it also includes a gate at Holland Road to kind of pick up some additional storage if we don't do the North Gate Park. So moving along, the projects I'm going to update you on are the ones that we're currently working on within these neighborhoods. The first one, the Princess Anne Plaza golf course conversion. Even though we're not showing funding on this until FY21, we are going to the public on October 3rd to present to them the golf course concept that shows the park amenities. So that's going to happen on October 3rd. Hopefully we'll get some feedback from them, and Parks and Rec is joining us in this public meeting. The design for the full project is expected to begin next summer when the funding comes available for the project, and we are developing an execution plan to identify the best methods to phase the actual excavation of this project. Windsor Woods drainage improvements. This is still the parent project. We still have 3 projects, and as I mentioned, the pipe projects. The first one, the Clubhouse Road project, the design is complete. We are expected to begin construction next February. The South Plaza Trail Presidential Boulevard drainage improvements, again, this is a pipe project. It's under design and approximately 30% complete. We expect to start construction July of '22. And Old Forge Road, Red Lion Road, and Old Forge Court. Now, all of these are shown on this map. That's under design and approximately 30% complete, and also expected to begin construction in July of '22. The Windsor Woods Pump Station. This design is underway and approximately 20% complete. We're still in the early stages of this design. We are expected to begin construction in the summer of '26. Now, this is based on the funding as it's allocated right now. We're expecting it to take 4 years to construct. The other part of this project is it's going to require state and federal permits before construction can begin, and that could take up to 2 years to obtain those. And the Windsor Woods Tide Gate. The engineering design on the Tide Gate and the interim pumping is ongoing. It's approximately 30% complete. We expect to start construction in January of '21. This project is also going to require a permit. We estimate construction will take approximately 2 years. And finally, the dredging project. So we are still complete. 4 of the 5 canal dredging projects are complete. I still have this map in here to kind of give you an idea of where they're located. The last piece is the Windsor Oaks West Canal. The construction began last August, and we hope to be finished next summer, June of 2020. And that's all I have. I'll take questions.
Discussion. John?
I have a couple of questions. On slide 5, I assume the Army Corps of Engineers is the person who's the defendant in the case, I mean, the defendant? If they're suing them about issuing the permit, is that what's taking place there?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure who the litigant in that process was. There's a lot of talk about pending easements and taking time for easements. At a later date, I would like to have maybe that's a legal discussion, what are those issues, and, when is enough negotiation enough that it's costing us and creating flooding risk? There's got to be a sweet spot between working with people in a cooperative way and the risks that you're assuming, so I'd like to better understand that trade space when that occurs. Where are we relative to having the visualization tools that we can actually show the public at these workshops and show ourselves here? Actually, based on real data we had, here's what the flooding was, and now as a consequence of the improvement, and you actually see that same event, but in that same event, the water doesn't actually flood. I know we've talked about that a lot, but I think that is an essential aspect of our ability to communicate with the public, is to visualize the data that we are collecting. They do it on traffic, they do it on the deep ocean. I mean, people just now expect that as a standard of performance, and we've got to figure out a way to meet the public's expectation. They'll better understand what it is if they can visualize it. And for the amount of money we're spending, and I realize that might cost money, but that would be money well spent, in my personal opinion. You had mentioned on slide 9 that there was a bid opening. Was the bid opening less than what was the estimate?
It was right around the engineer's estimate. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was very close.
It was very close.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking, a lot of projects across the state and across the nation are coming in these construction areas 15 to 20% over. So I was just curious what our financial risk might be relative to cost estimates. Thank you very much. On page 20, are those then-year dollars? I mentioned that 350 million, is that 2018, is that 2009? What year dollars is that expression?
That is 2018 dollars.
Okay, my only recommendation would be as that time goes on that we try to, keep that. I know it's a speculation number at this point. Are we annually going back, now that we've cleaned out 4 and 5 feet of mud out of these various ditches over in the lakes, because I mentioned before, sensors are very cheap today. They're extremely inexpensive. Are we using sensor technology to monitor what the accretion rate of siltation is? And how are we monitoring so we don't get back to where we were in terms of only 6 inches and the ducks are standing in the mud and the water? I mean, I'm just trying to share what's the follow-up plan to keep monitoring the carrying capacity of our ditches? Not the answer today, but I'd like to understand what that is and how we're providing for that, because once you make the improvements, if you don't do that, you don't get anything. And talk about the visualization tool. And at a later date, I'd like to know, for all the projects we added, where did the new money come from? I'd like to understand, where was that in the CIP, and that it was unobligated such that we were able to do that. I think that's great, but I'd just like to know where that trade space was found at a later date.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael?
I want to thank you for your presentation and for all the work that you and your colleagues are doing to
Thank you.
walk us through these complicated, complex at times concerns. I think for me, that the experience of preparing for the potential impacts of Hurricane Dorian, which we're going to hear about in a minute, and speaking with neighbors and residents from throughout the city sort of crystallized the importance of this work for me, as if it weren't already. I think it further emphasized the need and the importance and the impact that it has for people who live in Virginia Beach. And so we all recognize incredibly important work. And one thing that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation is that this doesn't reflect the ongoing maintenance that's occurring.
Right.
And I wonder if, for the sake of myself and for the public, you could take a moment to speak about that, and to also maybe help us understand. There's I think a perception that there's some deficiencies in maintenance, and certainly there have been I think it's widely acknowledged there have been some historical deficiencies. What are we doing now, and what will we be doing in the future to maintain these systems so that they're functioning, they're working, and that people have more confidence in that process?
Okay, I'm going to have to defer that to Mark.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry if I'm going a little off script, but I think it's important.
We've got three sections of stormwater management, capital flood control, surface water quality, and then maintenance. Okay, under maintenance, we have several programs. One of them is the lake dredging program, which gets, I believe, about $5 million a year, where we're going around and we're systematically identifying ponds and lakes that have silted in over time that need to be dredged out. We're doing that. We also have a neighborhood revitalization program, where we've been doing that for, I think, about 6 or 7 years. We go into a subdivision, we clean the system, the pipe system, we TV the pipe system, we identify the defects that need to be corrected, as in broken pipes, leaks, things like that. And then we go into those neighborhoods and we make those corrections. The whole idea behind that is to bring the drainage system back up to its original design standard. Now, at the same time, we have now these watershed models. What we are going to do with that is we use the models to model the existing pipe system and identify improvements for increased flood control. In other words, you may in the original design have a 12-inch pipe. When you run the model today with today's standards and everything, the pipe will be, you'll need a 36-inch pipe. So we will go in, and if we have that information when we do the rehab work, we will put that pipe in at that time. A good example is Aragona right now, where we went into Aragona earlier from a maintenance perspective, cleaned it, made some repairs, and now we have the CIP project. It's going to make some major big pipe improvements. So we've got that going on. We also have, I'll call it the daily maintenance. That's when a resident can call in at 385-1470, Public Works Operations Customer Service, report something, and then we will go out and investigate. If there is a problem, we'll generate a work order, and we will go out and fix that, okay? I will tell you, we are plagued with cave-ins throughout the city right now.
That was going to be my follow-up.
Yes. I mean, we are literally plagued
And Mark,
with.
if I could interrupt you for a minute.
Sure.
The people that I talk to call them sinkholes.
Yes.
So could you help to provide some insight about what is actually happening here with
Okay.
cave-ins, or what is known in our community by many people as sinkholes?
They call them sinkholes, they call them potholes, depends on where it is.
Yeah.
But a cave-in is like a cough to a cold. It's the symptom you see. There's a hole in the ground. What's really happening is under the ground at the pipe system, or where the pipe ties into a drainage structure, there's a crack or there's a leak or an opening somewhere in that system where sediment is infiltrating into the pipe system. And then it eventually migrates up to the surface, and there's a hole. How we address those is we will go out and investigate it. We'll determine, yes, it is a cave-in. Our first step is, and I know everybody says we just keep going out and putting stone in the hole. The answer is yes. We put stone in the hole, we just safe it up, and then we come back and we work on the design or determine what the fix is. Because the fix, depending on the pipe, type of pipe, the depth of the pipe, the severity of the cave-in or the defect in the pipe is what you design your solution to. So your solution may be real easy, or it may be a little bit more complicated, and that takes time to develop, and it takes time to implement the actual fix. What's happened to us is, as the city has matured, All those subdivisions that were built in the 80s and the 90s are maturing. We're starting to see more cave-ins in those subdivisions, and they've just have multiplied. So we're working on a financing plan so we can start addressing more of those. That means something else might go for right now on a temporary basis, but we're trying to get a handle on those. The reason why we have cave-ins is why we created that neighborhood revitalization program, because what we saw was a trend where you would see cave-ins throughout a neighborhood, and that would tell you, hey, let's look at the whole neighborhood as opposed to just trying to do one cave-in at a time as you march down the road. So that's sort of the genesis on where our neighborhood rehab came from. And then that's akin to the public utilities find and fix program with the sanitary sewer. That's generally what we're doing with maintenance right now. We've got another maintenance program to maintain and keep all our stormwater pump stations running. We've got 15 throughout the city. They're pretty critical elements, and we really want to stay on top of those. That answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
Councilman, as part of the budget process, we usually do bring in a pretty detailed Public Works operations briefing, and so we'll make sure that we have a section dealing just with stormwater operations maintenance, because the word doesn't do it quite justice. A lot of resources are going into maintenance. It's just a very big city.
Well, I think we have a gap in terms of at least perception or in reality, but in how residents feel about that. And I think we need to do a better job of sharing what's happening. And but I'm concerned about that gap. And I wonder if you, in your consideration, I mean, is that what are your thoughts on that? I hear it a lot. The ditches aren't maintained, and it concerns me.
Well, in just about every aspect of our maintenance, we could use more resources to it. The backlogs are not what we would like them to be. Mark mentioned $5 million per year for BMP maintenance. That puts us on a schedule of about 100 years to go through the 500 BMPs that the city has to maintain, and that really needs to be about half of that. So right now, a lot of the additional monies that you have given us have gone to capital projects. As we prepare this budget, we can have a conversation as to whether or not you would want to look at that differently.
And let me just say, we balance our funding, we spread it across all the needs of maintenance. And I recognize there are residents out there that they feel they have a legitimate concern. We understand it, but we have to balance that concern with other concerns and move through the city.
Okay, John, and then Barbara.
As we concluded the budget and adopted it last year, you may recall that the budget acknowledged that we have a 12-year backlog, and it postponed dealing with that backlog until FY23, which was 3 budgets away from the budget we were in. So that was a conscious choice the majority of council chose, was not to address deferred maintenance, 12-year backlog.
Barbara?
Well, a lot of the issue too is that there's so many different kinds of water we're dealing with. This is stormwater. And then, of course, there's sea level rise or water that's coming from tides. And then there's groundwater. And so when we're looking at water, we really have to know what's the source of that water. And I think, all of this is a major learning process with everybody, because it's not the same. And the fix is not the same for each of them. And particularly in the southern part of the city where we have the wind tides, and when you look at water that's in the ditch might be full, and we haven't had any rain for several weeks even sometimes, but that's water that's come from the tide, the wind, if it's in the wrong direction. And so all of this really is a process of understanding, you know, where all this has come. But I think we've come a long way with these studies. I mean, I know when people say, well, you're doing a study, that sounds like you're, you know, kicking the can or something. But you have to know what you're dealing with in order to know what the fix is. But I think now with this culmination of this information that we have, I'm hoping that we're going to all be able to better understand what we're dealing with. But I know looking at these southern canals, or whatever we call them, projects and so forth, this is dealing with stormwater. We really haven't gotten down there to the end of Muddy Creek and so forth, where we've got the major tide impacts. But I really think, you know, we're getting there gradually. When people look at the ditch and say, well, this is water that's come in from the tide, or this is rainwater. And so I think all of this is a major, I hate to use the word education, but really understanding all of these different sources and how we deal with it. And then, of course, there's the whole quality issue, the water quality issue, which is another whole thing. And I think you've been trying to say something, and I keep interrupting you.
No, ma'am, that's fine. Yeah. Over the years, we have set up maintenance programs, the off-road ditch, lake dredging, neighborhood rehab. We know we didn't have as much money as we wanted, but we established those programs. On the engineering side of the business, we set up these models, and the whole idea is to use these tools and these programs to really get after the stormwater drainage issues, the water quality issues, in a fashion that you can escalate it based on funding and need, or you can lower it back down as need. So you could match what you needed with what your funding is. And you also have tools that'll help guide you to go to where you really want to spend your money on stormwater management.
But I think this whole process of design, you know, so much of what you say, this is in design, that's a critical part. And it's a part of getting the work done, but nobody has seen it yet. But if we don't get the design right, we're not going to get the project right. And so, but I'm you know, we're seem to be getting to a lot of the places where the design is complete and it's ready to go to construction. And so I think we're going to be seeing a lot more than we have, but it's just been this time in here when we had to figure out how to get it right.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I think we're going to start seeing a lot of, I hope we're going to start seeing a lot of action, and that's what I think maybe, you know, folks want to see. And they think we haven't been doing anything, but you had to do this design work, and it's just like road building. Phil keeps telling us it takes 8 years because so much of it is in design, in acquisition, and all of those things that the people aren't seeing the work, but it's being done. But we're ready to deliver, I hope, in a lot of cases.
Yes, ma'am. And it's actually the engineering we have the most control over. It's the other things you have to do, utility relocation, right-of-way acquisition, and permitting. Those are the challenges that we have to work through to get a project to the point where we actually go to construction.
Hold on, South Ridge. Have we attempted to go up? I know the administration is always asking for people to come and say, what can we do to help you expedite projects? Have we actively engaged in Office of Management and Budget, the regulatory section of that place, which governs all the other agencies, and asked them for assistance or waivers that the people can grant? Have we actually asked for any waivers or different process? All the rules always have things looking for innovative approaches. The administration has indicated that they're willing to entertain those. Have we ever went to Washington and asked?
No, we haven't. But what we do is we are plugged into the permitting agencies pretty good. We discuss each project and what the best permitting strategy is. We always go after nationwide permits. I know we had lengthy discussions on the Windsor Woods gate, so we could structure that permit to a point where it might get through. But no, we haven't elevated to the next level of going to talk to them and say, hey, we need help.
I think at some point, given the magnitude of what we're looking at across the city, billions of dollars, it really makes sense. The regulatory environment at the working level tends to have its own inertia.
Yes.
The middle management piece down, where the people at the top are screaming for reform and innovation, but the people at the bottom are, resistance, and it's because they're used to where they're at and they don't, but sometimes you have to make that step to at least ask. And because it's not the top that's the problem, it's the innovation's not being executed that's being asked for. But, they have a stake, they have a vested interest in the status quo. So I just encourage you to be looking at that and thinking about that. Because there's
Okay.
gotta be, we're telling people that, we have money, we have this, but, so your hurricane comes, saw your house flooded, but we were make sure we had all these little squares just right. I'm not saying it is as easy as that, but we need to be aggressive advocates in the process to make sure that we are getting the attention. People are part of the environment. We need to protect people too. That's all my only point. We just need to make sure we're being aggressive as we look for the innovation opportunities.
Okay, Ms. Heather?
Well, I know this is on the sea level rise area, but that 3x3x3 plan that we have to have in order to get the federal money with the Corps. I know y'all were going to go to New York to talk with the Corps, and that got
So
put
great.
aside.
Thank you
Is
for the
that back
segue.
on?
Yes, ma'am. Tomorrow morning, Mark Johnson, Bob Mathias, and I will join Major General Mike Walsh, and we're traveling to New York to talk to the money people at the Corps' North Atlantic Division and do what we can to get ourselves into that 3x3x3 process. Mark,
Well,
you
that's
wanna
critical,
add
because if we
anything?
don't get into that, we're kind of slowed up a lot. But I've got confidence that y'all did it right through all this process, and you're gonna do a good job.
As it turns out, Deputy City Manager Chandler will be out of town, Deputy City Manager Williams will be out of town, I'll be out of town, Steve Cover is around if anything happens, and so is David Bradley.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, very informative, thank you.
Hey, Tony.
Moving on.
All right, we'll give time for the Public Safety and Office of Emergency Management to come in here, and our Director of Emergency Management, Aaron Sutton, is going to give us a briefing on the hurricane season and also an after-action report on Hurricane Dorian.
Good evening, again. We're still getting feedback from the departments on Dorian after action, but I figured today I would hit on some high points of the immediate feedback that we've gotten. But if anybody's been had the Weather Channel on, because I assume everyone like me watches it 24/7, right? We do have a very active Atlantic right now, so we're certainly keeping an eye on everything. In May, when the outlook came out from NOAA, it was basically considered a near normal season. El Nino was in effect, so we were looking at pretty much kind of standard 9 to 15 storms, 4 to 8 hurricanes, 2 to 4 major hurricanes, which is kind of that middle ground. And then in August, NOAA came out with the updated forecast, increased that 30% above average to 45%. So we saw the uptick in named storms, and hurricanes, major hurricanes, didn't change. And basically, there's one factor in that, and that's the fact that El Nino has stopped. It has ended, and that is what El Nino is what keeps the Atlantic kind of calm during hurricane season, and that's why the forecast went up for us. But again, at the end of the day, we watch these hurricanes and watch these hurricanes. It's kind of like watching paint dry as we see it come off the coast of Africa and meander its way, especially with Dorian that stopped for almost a total of 36 hours and stayed in one place. It really, the activity is really determined by short-term weather patterns. So what they talk about when it comes off Africa and says, oh, watch out, it's coming for Florida, it's coming for Georgia, it really goes back to what are our weather patterns in those particular days as it gets up the coast. So I know it is very painful to watch all of the information over and over again, but please keep in mind as we do monitor the hurricanes, we really are looking at that short-term weather pattern, and when they put it up about 10, 15 days ahead of time, what you see there is not what you're automatically going to see or whether we see it at all. We love our North Carolina neighbors. They provide a good defense for us, but at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that we're vigilant and what we keep an eye on and make sure that we are prepared and our city is prepared. For Hurricane Dorian, really, these are kind of the basic statistics that came out from the National Weather Service. I do want to draw your attention, the Chesapeake Light Tower on the 6th of September had 83 mile per hour wind speeds. So we did see some of those gusts in our particular area, Cape Henry, out at the Third Island, Rudy, Sandbridge, above 60 mile an hour wind gusts, which is what they were predicting. So we did actually see them. One of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tide gauge was up into the major flood stage. That was one of our big concerns because that was going to be that's high tide, plus the storm surge timing, plus the wind gusts. Those were all the factors that we were taking into account as we made our decisions for the mandatory evacuation of Sandbridge and voluntary evacuation of Zone A. We did have our forecast challenges with this storm. You all saw that with it coming to almost a halt off the coast of Florida and then moving very, very slowly. And the track, as with most storms, wobbling back and forth becomes a challenge in making sure we're doing the things that we need to do in a timely manner. This storm didn't give us that window that we typically like to have for moving folks into shelters or evacuating areas because the storm changed enough on Thursday that we had to make some decisions pretty quickly. The National Weather Service from Wakefield called me directly and provided us some input based on the storm surge that they were expecting, based on the high tide, tidal flooding that they were expecting, and some expectations of overwash in the Sandbridge area. So we did make the decision to issue the mandatory evacuation for the Sandbridge area and then provide the information for voluntary evacuation in Zone A. And we opened up both Kellam High School and Brickell Academy or Old Donation School for shelters.
We always could use a Sharpie too.
Just add that around there. So I know there's been several questions why we did wait so long, but the change in track or the change in the forecast, not so much that actually the track moved just about 25 miles to the right, and so we had a kind of near miss for us. Had it been just those 10, 15 miles to the left, and we would be where Ocracoke is digging out right now. So I mean that is the distance of error for this. So we feel that we needed to make the decision for Sandbridge in our low-lying areas. Evacuation and sheltering, obviously in Florence, we had some challenges with the directive of mandatory evacuation from the governor. We were on the phone with the governor back and forth to understand kind of what they were deciding. Obviously, it affects our folks here in our community with our military folks. If the governor issues a mandatory evacuation, there are significant funds that go along with that. So we also become advocates for our military partners too in making the best decision for our community. And in the end, the governor yielded that decision to the localities to identify what areas they needed to evacuate in that targeted evacuation. Most of our partners did the same, voluntary evacuation of Zone A, or mandatory in certain low-lying areas. Sheltering, we just went through an update of our sheltering and kind of readdressing the buildings that we've identified over the years, and these worked very well. We're in a tier sheltering format now. So Tier 1 includes Kellam, ODC, and Lansdowne High School. Big capacity, well-built Category 2 buildings, and we instituted that for this. We also did open up, while Lansdowne is our designated shelter in Tier 1 that can hold pets, we did kind of bend, and we've set it up in Kellam High School, and we did have one dog that did come to the pet shelter. We had a handful of folks at Kellam and a couple dozen up at ODC, and it worked quite well. Our Housing Resource Center, after Florence and several hurricanes history, with our homeless population, we want to provide the best opportunity for them to get in out of the elements. And with the Housing Resource Center opening, it has allowed us to provide that support for the homeless folks ahead of time. And if we need to, if anybody, if the public safety identifies some other folks that need to move there, that way they're also being in contact with possible services, so it works out quite well. And the feedback that I've received said that was a great program, and continuing to move forward is very positive. EOC, we did start meeting, obviously, when the storm started looking like it was going to come visit us. We did do an overnight activation into Friday, and very well staffed. Everybody was coordinating. For us, obviously, the power outages were very significant, 28,000. I think in Michael, we hit 33,000. So we worked very close with Dominion Power. We always have such a great relationship with Max and his crews, and he did come by to visit us. And their restoration timeline was off the charts. I think we went from 28,000 to 8,000 in less than 24 hours. The benefit was they did have a lot of crews that were staged because they had all gone down to Florida, so they were moving back up the coast. So we had a lot of resources, which was helpful. Ron Angor and his staff were out shortly after the storm passed to look around and see if they were going to have to begin the damage assessment process. So they were well organized and coordinated. Plus our Public Works out taking a peek afterwards to make sure we were nowhere near the threshold for declaration, and I do not believe that the Commonwealth of Virginia is anywhere near their threshold for federal declaration for Dorian. But we were out there. We did get eyes on things. We did have we had flooded roads, we had some garages, we had trees down, things like that, but no significant damages reported across the city for this. The biggest issue we have is debris cleanup. If you've driven anywhere around the city, you've seen the 4x4 piles all throughout. With the winds, as you saw, gusts over 60 miles an hour in all of our old tree canopy, it did bring down quite a bit. So waste management and yard waste collection's been going on, and just wanted you to see, and John Barnes is here if there are any further questions. But they're out, they're making their rounds. It is 85 to 90%, so almost every house has some semblance of a pile out, so going around and getting this is taking some time, but they are out there working diligently to get that, to get caught up. Boom trucks are out there, staffing is up there, and they are updating this calendar as they complete their routes. So, just to kind of bring you all back a little bit, it's always my opportunity annually to update you on kind of OEM and hurricane preparedness and planning. The last time I talked to you last year after Florence, we were looking at short-term planning for evacuation zone messaging, evacuation sheltering workshop, damage assessment software, sheltering assessments, recovery plan, and cost recovery training. You can see we've accomplished some of these. The evacuation sheltering workshop, we had scheduled, but due to our event that we have, that's been pushed. Continue rollout of damage assessment software. We have several departments that are using our software system, which is called Crisis Track, which they can go out with their mobile tool, and Ron's group has embraced this for the real estate assessors, been very significant. Public Utilities is on board, so we're still working through several of the departments that do damage assessment, but it is a tool, a fairly inexpensive tool that maps it right away and gives us the FEMA estimate fairly quickly. Longer term, we are going to be completing the shelter operations plan. Human Services, much to my excitement, has brought on a shelter coordinator full-time to assist in getting additional plans up to date, working through the training piece, getting more departments involved, and supporting overall sheltering. The citywide evacuation plan, the state just finished the hurricane evacuation study. So we just got those results about less than a month ago, so we'll be working through that for 2020. Again, refining our policies and procedures for damage assessment. There are some departments that they've been doing it this way for a long time, so to change them over to the electronic process, we're gonna work through that. The public outreach is always on my list. Functional exercise. We've had a lot of practice in the EOC for activations, but actually being able to come back in the EOC to do a functional exercise is an opportunity that in May of 2020, we will be doing this because we were the recipients of a program from FEMA, the Integrated Emergency Management Program, where they pay for the whole thing. They're coming down. We actually submitted it as a regional exercise. So Chesapeake, Norfolk, and Virginia Beach will get together and work through a hurricane scenario, more so on the recovery side, but bringing everybody together. And then obviously we started with our recovery plan workshop. So the next steps is to actually sit down and complete the plan. So any questions?
Any questions, Guy?
Aaron, thank you for your usual clear, thorough, detailed report. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to make a comment. I have some friends and family who've been involved in the disaster relief effort in Ocracoke, and I wanted to take advantage, if you don't mind, of making a plug for that. There is a lot of devastation. A lot of folks are, it's not the Bahamas, but there are a lot of folks hurting down there, and the property damage is severe, and it's going to take a good while to recover. And if anyone is interested in supporting that, I would go to Ocracoke, and that's spelled O-C-R-A-C-O-K-E. But this is all one word, Ocracoke Disaster Relief @gmail.com. If you send a message to them, if you're interested in supporting that effort.
We'll make sure that we push that out through our channels as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Barbara, then Michael.
Well, Aaron's been working with us for 10 years.
Yes.
Long before you got to be where you are. But down in the rural area with our disaster preparedness and so forth, we just really have a great concern about older folks who, because, you know, everybody's not close to their neighbors, with people being farther from their neighbors and particularly alone. And we have been working all these years. We have all this wonderful plan and all this buddy system and everything else, but we fall apart every time with communication because we lose communication with folks. It sounds so simple that we'll be able to give people a phone call and so forth, but it goes down in a lot of instances. I mean, that's a bigger problem than power. And of course, we're really concerned with ice storms, you know, because that's really going to be tough. And it worries me. We're really due for one of those when, you know, all the branches fall on the power lines and we lose power in an ice storm. So we need some help from people who understand that technology but I don't want to name carrier companies, but some
Right.
of them go out and then we lose all this communication. What we can do or what we should recommend to people that they have to be able to not lose communication, because that is so important. I mean, we worry about flooded roads and all of that too, but communication is where we fall apart every time. So if we can kind of get something in the works that we can get some folks who can advise us on the best way to get our people prepared.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Mrs. Henley, as you know, we did do a little looking into that, and with one of the communication companies, which remain unnamed, and they explained that these days with the new fiber, although the fiber transmits the information with virtually no energy loss, they all come to these nodes, and the nodes themselves have a power requirement. And they put a battery in that that lasts, they said, 4 to 5 hours. And from my personal experience, just about exactly 4.5 hours after the power went out, the internet, the phone, and the TV went out at the house. And when my wife called, she was told it will not come back until the power comes back. And sure enough, when the power came back within a minute or two, so did all the communications. What did work, of course, were cell phones. Cell phones were far more reliable. The communication company said that they know of these outages, and when they see one and they think it's not going to be restored in time, they will send someone out with a generator. I didn't track down as to exactly why it didn't happen in this particular case. They did say that in the area that we were talking about, in your area, they did send a generator down there, and it came back, the communications came back before the power did. But you'll have to tell me whether that's correct or not. It wouldn't be the first time the communications company didn't tell me
Well,
exactly.
thank goodness Dominion Power did do this fantastic job of getting people back on. I feel like, I mean, I know Knott's Island was out for a long time. I think Marsh Road was in a disastrous area.
Yeah.
But by and large, things came back on within the day and so forth. But I just shudder to think of a nice
But it's
storm
something
that
to-
things are 3 days down.
For us to consider, yeah,
Can't do that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Know what we're gonna do, but we can't do that.
Okay, Michael?
Ms. Sutton, I had a chance during the storm to visit the Emergency Operations Center as well as to visit some of the shelters that were been in place. And as a new member of council who's doing everything I can still to learn about the mechanics of our government and about the operations of the city of Virginia Beach, I was just really proud and hugely impressed with everything that was happening there from public safety professionals who were working very hard to promote safety to your entire team. And I was particularly struck when I visited the shelters, and thank goodness there weren't that many people there. But in a serious situation, more serious situation, there would be many more people there. And what struck me was that many people who, for a variety of reasons, find themselves in a shelter may be underserved in other ways. And one thing that I didn't realize, one component of this that I didn't realize, was that there were professionals from the city of Virginia Beach who were on site to provide some wraparound services to the people who were in the shelters in an effort to more fully serve them. And I wonder if you could speak about that, because it's one component of putting up a shelter that I'm not sure many in the public are aware of, and it was one that really touched me and one that I was very impressed by. And I wonder if you could share more about that.
Well, part of the sheltering process, getting it open and getting the folks in there, while not a significant number take advantage of it, there are.
I met the dog, though.
Yeah, you did meet the dog. Oh, good. There are folks for several different reasons. They need power because they're on a machine, medical machine. There are folks that just don't feel comfortable in their home that get in there. Well, Human Services provides most of the staffing with support from other departments. And a few years ago, we realized it came about in trying to close shelters that folks weren't anxious to go home for whatever reason. And so we started making sure that we have the process to provide support. If you can't go, is it because you don't have access to your home? Is it because you don't have transportation? Is it because your home is unsafe? So it started leading us to a more well-rounded approach to, well, if it's transportation, we'll help get you back to your house. If you're unsure the status of your home, we reach out to our public safety folks and say, hey, can you go by? Let's see what it looks like. Or if it is the overall services, maybe it is the Housing Resource Center that can provide support. So that it kind of came about because we needed to get the kids back into the schools, so we needed to get the schools closed. But now that's part of our team process when we begin to, when they come in, we get a little bit more information from them and make sure that we provide those.
And just one follow-up, is that standard practice in shelters, or is that something is that a best practice, in other words, or is that something that's unique to Virginia Beach? Because it's very impressive. Some of the services you mentioned were offered, but there were also many other things, mental health services. You could tell the people there were concerned about a variety of factors that may be related to the people who were there. And so I just wonder if that's
some of our
commonplace.
localities do that based on the population that they have. Others, it's not feasible for them just based on staffing challenges that they may have. So, but it's definitely something that we've kind of tried to do for our city to make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind.
We should be very proud of it. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Ms. Henley, did you have any?
Just a teeny tiny little thing. The recording that announced where the shelters was, I had to sit and think for a long time to think, where is Brickell? Make sure
We
they
went
know
back
it's
and
Brickell.
forth on that, on what to, because I know it as Old Donation, and so we went back and forth.
They say Brickell, right? I mean, I couldn't figure out Brickell.
We'll do that. Appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank
anything else? Just want to say you folks did a magnificent job. The EOC, how many people did you have there? Like 75 people from all over?
I think at one point we had it pretty full, but everybody was there without issue.
It was a situation, hope for the best, but prepare for the
Exactly.
worst.
Exactly.
And you folks did an outstanding job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. All right, at this point, council comments. Anyone? Barbara?
Yes, I have two things, since we don't have liaison reports today. A few weeks ago, somebody asked about the railroad right-of-way and what we were possibly doing about a future bike trail for that, and I mentioned that there was a grant that we were applying for. We have applied for it. It's a build grant. We won't know until December whether we get it, but Elaine Lynn, who took Wayne Wilcox's place, is doing a fantastic job. They've worked overtime to get this grant application in at the last minute. This is just a concise version of it. I think the grant application is about 150 pages, but she passed this out at the Bikes and Trails Advisory Commission meeting yesterday, and I just thought you folks would like to see what is proposed here, so you're up to speed on it. Then, at the last meeting, I had suggested this policy amendment to our boards and commissions appointments, and since we haven't had a chance to talk about it, I didn't ask for it to be on the agenda for a vote this time, but maybe if you look at it again, we can put it on at our next voting meeting. But because we did have a little glitch about whether a reappointment would require that process, they have added a little quote here that says, no person but being nominated for appointment to an initial term, so that a reappointment would not require the process that we put the name on the table at one time and then not vote on it until the next. So I'll just pass this around with this addition, and if we have any comments or questions, if not, we can ask for it to be on the agenda for a vote at our next meeting.
Great. Anybody else? Michael? And then Sabrina.
Because I've been here for short tenure, I wonder if you could help me understand better how the process, I'm familiar with how the process has been conducted since I arrived on the council. Have no issue with the proposed change, but I'm just wondering if, in your experience, if the process changed any over the course of the years. In other words, why the need for this now?
But because, you know, we started out with this nice ordinance and said that each member of the council could review the talent bank applications for 15 days and so forth. So, you know, it kind of started out that, you know, we didn't put a name on the table and immediately somebody that most people didn't know would be appointed, and now it's kind of gotten to be a thing where a name might be put out at the very last instant when half of us have practically left, and then it's somebody nobody knows. We really need time to be able to vet these folks, or at least look at the talent bank applications and find out more about the people that we're appointing, because we're appointing people to some pretty serious positions, and I think it's important that we all feel comfortable with the people that we're appointing, and we have an opportunity to perhaps call some of their the people that they have listed as for recommendations, or look at their background a little bit better. I really feel uncomfortable pushing that yes vote for somebody that I have never heard their name before.
Okay. Sabrina?
I also have a couple of comments. First, I want to pass out to you, because I already sent it to council by email, but I want to pass out a resolution that is actually a follow-up on the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission's resolution to celebrate and support local independent businesses during the time period of November 15th through December 15th, and to recognize it as Buy Local Month. And so during that time, they asked each city to adopt it as their own for their cities. And so this is a follow-up on that request. And if you notice on the back, you'll see the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission's resolution, and then this is the proposed one for our city. So I'll pass that information around to you. Again, certainly open to feedback on this resolution if you have any, but that is the initiation or and the reasoning for this particular resolution. Also, just to segue into business, I'm also hosting the Ignite Business Series seminar, which is the third one for this year, and it focuses on small businesses. This particular one will focus on entrepreneurship, and it is a response to community leaders who have cried out for not just jobs for the community, but also entrepreneurship opportunities. And thankfully, our city has several programs in place that support entrepreneurs, and this is going to be what that seminar is all about. I want to make sure they're aware and educate our entrepreneurs and small businesses. And of course, you're always welcome to come. It is going to be held on this Saturday, September 21st, at the Sandler Center from 8:30 to 12. Thank you. Anybody else need a copy?
Okay.
I've got a new
You have
Yeah.
one?
John?
Need a copy here?
I'll yield to Guy. He had his hand up before I did.
Okay.
Go ahead, Guy.
Pardon me.
I just wanted to announce and remind folks that I'm having a community meeting with the assistance of staff at the Law Enforcement Training Academy. That will be on Thursday of this week, September 19th at 6 p.m. The Law Enforcement Training Academy, for those who are not familiar with the location, is at 411 Integrity Way, which is pretty near the foot of the Bird Neck off-ramp of 264. The eastbound Bird Neck off-ramp on 264. Among the topics we've advertised as being open for discussion, but not by way of limitation of topics that anyone would like to discuss, will be such issues as dogs on the beach, e-scooters, 5G communication installations, the new sports center, the proposed dome site project, and our city manager search that we have just undertaken. I invite folks from all over the city, not just the Beach District, to attend, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, John?
Just a few things, and I'll walk through them quickly. I shared with, I think it was last Tuesday, some comments that I had done on the wireless service authority being established. Appreciate any comments on that. Thanks to the city attorney staff. I have incorporated that to track changes, so you can see those changes relative to the document itself. There are some serious, I think, I'll call it small d democratic flaws in that authority document. And I hope I can, when you look through there, you'll see the merits of that, but you'll be getting that again on Friday, integrated with the existing document. And I'll have some other thoughts. I hope we can set some time to talk about that as a council prior to the public hearing. It will come sometime after it's been advertised for 3 successive weeks. But that thing does deserve some serious assessment by us talking to each other before the public talks to us, I think. You may note, you got in your packet that I had added to our legislative package, the issue relative to an amendment that was necessary to the Knight Wagner bill to facilitate the dome site thing. I know that I'll vote for it, but I didn't like the fact, I understood why we had to do it, but last year, we made an amendment and supported an amendment that we never discussed with the public and never got vetted by the public before it was made. I don't fault Delegate Knight for acting on our behalf, but I wanted to make sure we didn't repeat that process this year, so that's why I added it to the legislative package. I know, Mr. Mayor, you talked about last year about actually providing real budget guidance. Kind of the time got ahead of us. I would hope that the manager selection process wouldn't get us not doing that again, so I hope we can find time on our agenda to truly talk about a real budget resolution to provide real fiscal priorities and fiscal guidance to the manager and staff before we get the fait accompli in March. I hope we can find some time to talk about Rudy Loop. If this is the consensus of this body that a passive park is the bandstand, and that may not be, but if it is, then we need to truncate and not expend a lot of energy in the community on things that there's no support at this table for, or at least engage the public why maybe we have the wrong answer, so I hope we can do that. And I also wanted to talk about at a future, this, not lose sight, I know I mentioned it, but I'm going to keep mentioning it every Tuesday, bond referendum for flooding in 2020. If you look at these projects, I don't know how we can make any significant progress without a significant capital infusion. And I will be sharing, I didn't have it done by today, but in your packet on Friday, a letter. I think we need to bundle. We often talked about strategic communication. Sometimes I think we deal with the dome site as a standalone project, and we talk about flooding, but we never package all this stuff together and communicate to the public. This is a bundle of things that we're doing. And so it's not, because people don't tend to, we track all this stuff, but the public doesn't. They don't see that there's, hey, we can deal with the 12-year backyard and do better than we're doing on the backlog on drainage and flooding. Because there is a perception out there that, hey, all our attention and focus and investments at the ocean front, and often sometimes how we process decisions reinforces that maybe misperception. But if we could bundle some of these things up and deal with them at once, it's a package as part of our vision of how things we're trying to reset, and deal with neighborhoods too, I think we could have better success, to your unity point, Mr. Mayor, and there's more trade space for compromise if there's more issues on the table being addressed at one time. At the end, I think there's more trade space to get 11 votes than there is sometimes on just one project, and I'm going to share those thoughts in a letter.
That'd be great, John.
That's all.
Anybody else? Okay, I have something. As you know, we have 2 concurrent investigations going on right now with the Chicago, folks, and then also our police. And some of you are aware we were trying today to, put together the police have reached a point where significant information can now be brought forward. And there was an election made that it would be better to defer it until a workshop day where we would have some time. And also, we needed time to contact the families because of the sensitivity of some of the information that's going to be out. So I'm going to ask Steve Colbert, we're going to have a little bit different time arrangement in our next meeting a week from today. And Steve, if you could just, give a description of what's going to go on and basically what's going to be covered.
Yes, sir, Mayor. So as you've requested, next Tuesday, the 24th at 6 p.m. After your workshop, senior staff of the police department under the chief's leadership are going to provide an update on where they are with the current investigation that's ongoing from our Virginia Beach Police Department's perspective on the event, the tragedy in Building 2 on May 31st. I want you to know that I couldn't be prouder of the work that Chief Severa's staff has done in this investigation. As you well are aware, the scope of the work that the men and women in our police department have had to do is nothing really short of phenomenal. And they will go over the numbers with you next week, but the volume of information that they've had to go through and process is really mind-boggling. So they're gonna provide you an update where they are at this point. They still got some work to do. They're still partnering with the FBI, and they've still got some work to do. As you all know, these sorts of investigations take months to do, and it's been a little over 3.5 months to this point. So as you have requested and felt it necessary to give an update, we're going to do that. A lot of effort has gone into the coordination of how we present it, so we make sure we get the information in a timely manner to our council, to our citizens, the victims of the event, our city employees, the families of the victims, to make sure that we time that properly and are very as aware as we can be in a timely delivering of that information.
You know, I think, as we reach a point where, the police have done hundreds of interviews, reviewed thousands of documents, and, in fairness to the families and the public, a time for, some, information to come forward. And I think it was important that we did individually notify each of the families, and we're providing provisions to get them here. And, it's a very sensitive nature. And, but once again, I was on a flight to Dayton a couple of weeks ago, and I ran into an FBI supervisor that was on the job, and he gave a tremendous amount of kudos to our police department and the way that we were responsive and everything. But once again, after we had the initial reaction, which everybody at this table was really, involved in, we had to, go into the investigative part. And the FBI and police asked that we, that they be allowed to conduct the investigation. But I think we reached a critical mass right now where, in fairness to the families going forward, the time has come to divulge some of the information. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Okay, agenda review.
So, we have speaker on every item except for 7A and B. So if everybody's okay with 7A and B, they can be on consent.
I have a suggestion, not for tonight, but does to contemplate for the city attorney, because I've seen this done by the governing bodies. This was I was on a travel trip and I was watching their cable television. I'm entertaining myself. One of the things that they did when they had one speaker is they rolled up all the consent items and the person could speak, but they got 6 minutes to talk about any of the items because it wasn't a lot of speakers. It isn't denying people the right to speak, but it is making economical and effect. I'm not saying doing that tonight, of course.
With this speaker.
But we need to think about some things, not to deny people the right to have a shot to speak, but maybe it's 10 minutes or whatever. But then it's not 30 minutes, and it's not the best use of the public's time. I'm not trying to cut people off, but I think that there is room for effectiveness there.
No.
So think about that.
Mr. Stiles, any comment?
I'd like to think about that, but I will look into it and report back if that's acceptable.
And then we could, and then maybe we can make it as a council discussion and decision on how to move forward with that, in fairness to any
Entire
speaker.
policy.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
review, whole
Yes,
holistic.
yeah, we can do that. That would be great. Okay, at this point, the chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions of the open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711A Code of Virginia, as amended for the following purposes. consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to the actual probable litigation where such consultation or briefings in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiation or litigating posture of the public body, and consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsels pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A7. First, Delora Margaret versus Officer Peter Brent, and Officer Torres, and also Holloway, Latasha, and Georgia Allen versus City of Virginia Beach et al. And also personnel matters, discussions, considerations, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1, council appointees, council boards, commission, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees.
So moved.
Second. Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Finley? Aye. Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Rouse? Mr. Belushi?
Aye.
Mr. Towers?
Aye.
Ms. Wooten?
Aye.
Ms. Wilson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Mayor Dyer?
Aye.
10 visitors.
Let's take 5 minutes.